Good morning. You're listening to WPVM LP in Asheville, North Carolina, 103.7 on the dial. This is the BLAINESWORLD show. We're heard each Wednesday at 9 a.m., and you can also watch us, which you might be doing now, on WPVM's Facebook page. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. And each week, what we do is focus on the Asheville theater scene, as well as on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce certainly one of the most positive people I know, and she is Ginger, is it Huebner?
Huebner.
Is that it?
Yep.
Okay, got it right. And you can feel free to wave to all your friends and friends on Facebook, Ginger, if
Hi.
anybody's watching. Okay, this is Ginger. Ginger inspires authentic communication through creativity, changing the way we see the world through visual translations of love, hope, and many, I love that, struggles in between. She uses the mediums of collage and chalk pastel to translate and capture artistically what often transcends expression in mere words. She works in these mediums through her own unique works of visual art and through her create plus connect collaboration with others. I love this too. When Ginger isn't busy creating and connecting, you can find her practicing handstands, walking her dog, or hanging with her family. Are we going to get to see a handstand today? No, you don't have to. I won't put you on the spot. But you really do handstands?
I do. I do.
Okay. Well, that'd be a fun talk sometime. We'll talk
That
about
would be fun.
walking about live as a handstand. And is it an handstand professional, a handstand? Well, I don't know what you call yourself.
Well, I
Fan?
started doing them because of Pilates.
Right.
It's something that, and so now I just do them for fun. I mean, it's good strength training, and I do them. My dog likes to do them next to me, so we do them together sometimes.
Can you walk on your hands also?
Not that far. I'm not
Okay,
that
not that far. Well, Ginger,
good.
let me ask you this question. In terms of as a kid, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Orlando, Florida.
Okay, and as a kid, did you always know you wanted to be an artist?
I don't know that I necessarily wanted to be an artist. I was an artsy kid. You know, I was always drawing, making things, definitely using my hands a lot. And I was definitely more in the arts creatively.
Did you go to school for that?
So no, I ended up going to school for architecture. So
Really?
which interestingly, I chose to go to Virginia Tech because they actually require students to have visual art as a part of the curriculum. Like it's built into the school. And I really wanted that. And really, it has turned out to be quite a blessing, even though I don't practice architecture anymore. The type of work I do as an artist came from architecture school. So
Well,
yeah.
when did you decide you didn't want to be an architect and you wanted to become an artist?
So it was a 5-year program, and every few years I would sort of be like, I'm just not sure this is where I'm gonna, settle. But it's such a good education. I couldn't put my finger on what else I wanted to do. And so it was about a year after I graduated, got married, moved to Seattle, and was working for a really amazing architect who I still am friends with. And I just was like, you know what? I just don't think this is what I'm meant to be doing. And I was doing the kind of artwork I do now then, which again emerged from architecture school, as a way for me to express how buildings felt, like the emotions of a building, because I don't really care how they go together.
But, but, but that is so cool, to be doing something and discover that the something you're doing leads to something else. I mean, that's a great story,
Yeah.
that
And
you
my
did.
first boss was amazing. He used my process. We would talk about sites that we were working on, where we were going to build a house, and what did it feel like. And I would do these drawings about the sites. So he really encouraged that for me. And that was sort of when I broke away about a year after I had graduated, which was a little scary, but
And so
once
when you broke away, I mean, I'm impressed, but also I feel being scared for you. So you had a steady job as a working in
yeah,
architecture. Then all of a sudden you decided after a year, you decided you didn't want to do architecture and you became an artist. But at least initially, that wasn't a steady job.
no, it really wasn't. And so I ended up getting a part-time job working in an after-school program, which is very funny because I have an
Right.
after school program here. But the art director, or the director was, she said, you're an artist. Why don't you do art with the kids? So I did. And it was super fun. And that led me to apply to this teaching job, which I would have never thought about, except that I had a lot of friends who were teachers. There was this opening for the art teacher of this private school, so I didn't need to be certified. So I applied, and somehow I got it.
Now, are you still at that job?
No, that was in Seattle.
Okay, because then I know then you came here and have
That
your
was, yeah, that's what got me into the profession of teaching. And then I went back to school for a master's degree in teaching visual art in Philadelphia.
okay.
And then we moved back to Seattle, and I worked in the schools there, the public schools. And then we moved to Asheville after our first kid, and our second kid was on the way. And
That's where we are now. Talk a little bit about the fact that we'll come back to the school in just a second, but you also kept up your art. Is that correct? You still do art?
yes.
And what kind of art do you do?
I do collage and chalk pastel. Mixed media is what most people would call it.
Okay, and if I can put you on the spot a little bit, because I've heard you talk about it, but I haven't seen it, can you maybe show an example of something you've done?
Yes, I can. I have this piece right here that is, I'm going to not show you that one because that's
Okay.
it's too hard with the reflection. So instead, I'm going to take you with me for a second.
Okay, but I could see it pretty well, but that's cool. So as we're setting up here, you're going to see Ginger. Oh, that's cool. You can see some of Ginger's artwork. So this is on your wall there?
Yeah, so there's little like this is collage, these pieces right here, and all the color is chalk pastel.
Yeah. So
and it's on paper. So there's another one.
Oh, what is that? That's very cool.
So there's some lines, there's images of it's actually a piece of coral that's meant to look like roots. There's little lines I draw with pencil sometimes. And I just kind of layer everything. And up here are some bigger lines.
Now, let me ask you this. In terms of when you're going to be drawing something big or even something smaller, where do you get your ideas as to what to put together?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of times it's just from life. I sort of call them like translations of life, the ones that I do for myself. So it's some idea or a concept or something maybe I'm struggling with or something that I'm inspired by. But I often work from words. So song lyrics or sermons or books. I'm collaborating with a poet right now on a book that she's publishing. So I've sort of translated some pieces of her work that are going to be in this book.
I was just going to ask you that. So in terms of the book too, so some of your artwork will be there, and then will you be doing the cover as well?
It will. Well, yeah, one of the pieces will be the cover.
Okay, so is this the first time you've done this?
Officially with an actual publisher, yes.
Very cool. Well, let me ask you this in terms of even with your work with kids, and I always wonder about this in the creative process. Is this something you do every day?
I wish I could say yes, that I'm in my studio. That is not the truth. I have 2 teenagers and life and everything. So with the school, that takes a lot of time, then the life and then the studio. But I've just moved into this new space. This is new for me, literally in the last 2 weeks. And it's sort of this very symbolic, but also very physical move into being more present and creating space for this work.
And boy, it looks like a beautiful studio. Is this part of your home or is this separate?
So this is actually one of our Roots and Wings classrooms that I am taking over.
Right. But where is this located? Is this downtown or is this part of your house or what is this?
No, so the Roots and Wings is in what we call the Roots Wings Creative Campus in the Oakley neighborhood of Asheville. It's at 573 Fairview Road.
Okay, is that cool? So this is where you do your own artwork. But then let's talk a little bit. You mentioned the school, and I have to ask you the idea for the name of the school first of all. It's Roots and Wings. I love the name of the school, School of Art and Design. How'd you come up with that name?
So it's actually inspired by my Nana, my mom's mom. It was a phrase that she used to use, and that's where it came from. When the school kind of was emerging in my head, that just sort of came to me.
Well, how'd you use it? You said Roots and Wings. What did she say?
Well, and I mean, it's not like hasn't been used before, but
Right.
It's this idea of like, you give your kids roots so that they can have wings and go out on their own. And I also, it was a part of our wedding, and other people have used it as well. But my Nana, I just recall her using it
Oh,
in the same way.
your Nana's not around anymore?
She is not, no.
But did she see this? Did she see the school come into fruition?
No,
Oh,
she got to see me get married.
okay. Well,
Yeah,
that's nice at least.
yeah.
But so talk a little bit then. So not only you're a practicing artist, but you also run this Roots and Wings school. Talk a little bit about that. What is it?
So Roots and Wings is a school of art and design education, and it emerged basically when we moved to Asheville. Teaching jobs were very few and far between, as they are. There's only so many art teachers, and I had kids that were 2 and 4 a little bit after we got here. And as I was forming community, I realized there wasn't a lot here. There's a lot of art in Asheville. A lot of people talk about Asheville as like a place to come for art and to buy art. There wasn't a lot going on for people that actually lived here, like to make art and create. And as a new mom, I continuously was enamored by how amazing kids are and how creative they are, and how the expectation level of typical schools, especially when my daughter started, I was looking for a preschool for her. Just like they hand them worksheets or with crayons, and I was just like, no, like they can work, And it was just because, so I always say that I sort of founded Roots and Wings with 3 lenses: my lens as an artist, as an educator, and as a parent. And together, I didn't move here to start a school, but when I got here and I was trying to find a school for my own kids, and community from an arts education standpoint, there just wasn't a lot of it. So, I don't know if you know the organization Mountain BizWorks.
Sure, yeah. I've done some work for them. Sure.
Yeah, they help folks who have a business idea. There's this foundations course you can take, and you basically end up with a business plan, but you're with this cohort of people. So you're like bouncing ideas off each other and really helping push things. And I just thought, I don't know if I have a business mind. I don't know. I have 2 brothers, a dad, very business oriented, work for big companies, and so I was kind of just curious. And since I couldn't find a teaching job, what if I created, a way to teach here on my own? And so I took this course, and by the end, Roots and Wings had emerged. Like, it was there. I had this whole school.
When did you start it?
2009.
Because what I find really cool about your story is the fact that you're saying in public schools, they're funding less and less the arts anyway. Forgetting, young kids, public schools, it's becoming increasingly hard, or that's one of the first things, unfortunately, that goes, the arts. So you started this in 2009. At what age level was it for?
At that time, it was a preschool, 3 to 6-year-olds. And
Okay.
then we eventually got into K-5 with an after-school program. Same issue. My kids needed,
Right.
I had a school to run. I needed some after-school options, and the options were just really like sad to me as a parent. I was like, not engaging, like,
Right.
a gym and a basketball isn't for everybody. It works for a lot of kids, but not everybody. And so I asked the elementary school where we were if we could just share space with the teachers, the classroom space at the end of the day. And then we took a percentage of what we made and gave it to the PTO to help.
Very sweet.
The school.
Great. Well, I love that. A real win-win situation. Wow, is that fantastic?
Yeah. And we did that all the way up until 2020 when everything fell apart. And unfortunately, our after school is probably not going to come back. Things are just so fickle. We don't even know still. Like, we're still dealing with COVID cases here at the school. Like, it's just, so that's really sad, but it was a long, it went on for, at least 7 years, 8 years. And we ended up at 3 different elementary schools with programming like that.
And you're saying COVID cases, I can relate. I just came through a case of, COVID. So, it's still out there, unfortunately. But back to you. So you ran the school. So I assume your children went to it also?
They did.
They didn't have much of a choice, I guess.
No, they didn't.
But, well, let me ask you this. Are they, and it reminds me of another question I'll ask, but are your 2 children, are they autistic?
They are artistic, but not in the same way. So, and that's what's really neat, is that I talk about how at Roots and Wings we use the tools of art and design to explore creativity, but there are so many other tools. So they both can and do some visual art, but it's not something that they do all the time. They have other, like my daughter is very into design, so that background of architecture, and my husband is an architect. We actually met. So that's a part of our world still. So she kind of is more inclined in that direction. And then my son, and they were both musicians in school. My son has gone a little bit further with that than her, but he also is now, as you can imagine, in the video world. He's been doing digital design, like animation, stuff like that.
Because your story reminds me of the fact that I remember when I was a kid, I'll tell it quickly, and I loved to draw and paint when I was a little kid. And I loved it to the standpoint, Ginger, my mother had like 5 refrigerators. She had it for all my artwork, right? Just, we didn't have food, but we put it, the art. But then I remember to this day, I got into like 2nd grade, and the first time I ever had an art teacher. And I spent a whole weekend doing artwork, and I showed it to the teacher, and she laughed, and I never did artwork after that. It's a true story.
There are so many stories like that.
Isn't that terrible? But
Yes.
because now, like, I have no interest in drawing or painting. As a kid, you do. And so what happens? What causes that? Aside from teachers, or is it sometimes even parents? What causes kids to stop being creative, if you will?
What you just said, basically. You have someone in your life who either makes fun of it, laughs at it, says I don't understand it, or what is that? And it's coming from such a personal place. No matter what it is we're talking about, it could be something like someone might perceive it as being very basic or whatever, but you're putting your insides into this visual thing, and you're putting it out there. And to have someone squash it, especially in front of peers in a classroom.
Yeah.
And there's a lot. And so I taught school in the public schools, and I know that we have to cover all the standards, and we have to do all these things. But there is a way. That was the other piece of starting Roots and Wings, was there is a way to teach kids how to be creative and focus on the process, not this thing we're creating, that has to be perfect, or has to be what I want it to be as the teacher. So we rarely use examples. We'll talk about steps of a process and the idea behind it, but we let a lot of freedom happen within that structure, which allows, the hope is, it helps the kids build the foundation of create like a truly creative foundation that is their voice. No one's stuff looks the same.
Well, let me put you on the spot a little bit to give advice to any parents or grandparents listening. And I don't know the answer to this, so I'm asking you, is what should a parent or grandparent say when a child brings home artwork, or even just working at home comes up with something? I've heard different things or different ways to say this, but what should you say to a child when he or she shows you something?
One of the best things we can do is ask questions. Not, what is it? But something like, tell me about that, right? Like, this is so exciting. And you can see they're all excited. So tell me more. I want to know all about it. That's all you have to say.
Great example, I guess, as opposed to also, I guess you shouldn't ask yes and no questions, because that cuts it. Yeah.
That can cut so deep. It's so simple. It may seem so simple, but that can be enough to turn someone off, like you were turned off. Like, oh, I guess I'm not, because she thought it was a person, but it was actually a
But wow. But I love your example, and I have to remember that. Just ask the questions, sort of like I'm doing on the radio here, and not come to, I guess, assumptions. Don't assumptions. What about also, Ginger, as a teacher, educator, in terms of, there's criticism of education for being the other extreme, like too positive, or that, you have to have an art show, or I guess do you have the end of the year, do you always have an art show of some sort?
We do with our preschool things,
right.
Yeah.
Talk about, though, the idea of maybe not awarding prizes, or not, giving everybody recognition. How do you balance that line?
Yeah, we're not really we don't do that here. Like, that's not, we just have an exhibit, and we're sharing the diversity of what everyone's creating. But in a school, if you have an art show, clearly that what you do as a teacher in that situation is you're looking at the standards that you're teaching from, which, every state, and there's national standards, and that's how you justify it, because as an educator, you still have the rubric and what you are, your assignment still has to have these things the kids are supposed to be doing. But there is a loose translation of that. I feel like it's hard. It's a hard job. but there's technique, but there's also the idea of creative thought. So those two things to me are both important, not just did you draw the perspective right?
Right.
You know, what was the perspective of? That would be kind of both those questions you have to answer.
Or even I can see when you go to college or graduate school or something, that's one thing, but would it be so bad is just have everybody show and maybe not only show but also talk about their artwork, so that, as you said, it'd be fun, even at your school, I don't know if you do this, but it'd be fun to see the students, their artwork, but also I'd love to hear them talk about it. Have you ever done that?
We do it in the sense that they get to tell their parents about it during the, like, whoever is they're walking around, they talk about it to them. But no, we've not done like little recordings. That'd be kind of fun with a little microphone.
Well, but I'm thinking out loud, and we'll talk about this off the air sometime. That'd be a fun show to do. You and I do a show on that, to have and get the children involved,
Yes.
to walk through, and remind me to talk to you about that off the air sometimes. It's something I'm moving into. But wouldn't that be a fun project? That to do a visual show of all the artwork. Put it down, seriously. I just love the idea. And on Facebook, and they'd all see themselves, but talking about their art, as opposed to just showing it, because.
Yes.
But one of the things exciting me about what you're talking about is the fact to make, and it will segue into your TED Talk too, but it talks about the fact that art can be seen, but isn't it cool it can be talked about as well, and to get kids especially to talk about their own artwork would be, I think, a fun thing to do, Anyway, remind me about that. And and I'll remind you about, I first got to meet you as you were preparing for a TED Talk, and that must have been a cool thing. Had you ever done anything like that before?
No.
So well, first of all, for the people who don't know it, what is a TED Talk?
So TED Talk is their tagline is ideas worth sharing, and different cities can have what's called a TEDx organization. So it's sort of under the umbrella of TED.com, and it offers people opportunities to share an idea, something they're working on, something they've done, something that they feel like they want other people to hear about. It's really amazing. So I just listen to TED Talks all the time, and the TED Radio Hour is a podcast, and it was on my kind of dream goals list. What if I could do a TED Talk? What if I did a TED Talk? I don't know. What would I have to say? What would is that sort of went through my mind. So when the TEDx Asheville came about, they had a 2-year hiatus because of the pandemic, and their call came around just an email list I'm on, and it said that their theme was opening doors and building bridges, which my work is basically all about. And so I thought, maybe I could have something to say. I don't know. Maybe I should just try and apply. So I applied, and somehow I made it in.
And so what was your topic?
So talking about having conversations beyond words. So using visual imagery and color, like I do, to talk. So it's what I do for my work. It's what I do with people through workshops. And especially with all the different, we're dealing with so much divisiveness and a lot of hard things right now. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of, it seems hard right now to have conversations that don't go south quickly. So I do it because it's a very healing process for me. It's how I think. It's sort of me. It's the way that I think. But I've realized that it is a tool that many, many people can use to translate things that they're feeling, but they don't know how to say it. Like if they try to say it, it's not going to come out right, or it doesn't come out right. And then and then they stop talking. Kind of like the third grade teacher snapping you on the hand for not drawing it right, But then they don't ever talk about it.
But what's exciting about it also seems to give students another option to express how they're feeling or thinking, as opposed to, like I said, saying to something or insulting somebody or turning somebody off. Hey, here's what I'm thinking, but you can see it, and that's kind of cool. So how was it like giving a TED Talk? So even explain the process, and we'll give a shout out. I'll let you give it to the person who ran it. We'll give her
Barry Barton.
Okay, the great Barry Barton. And people think about TED Talk, and what was it, 20 minutes or something, the talk?
It has to be under 18.
Under 18. But talk a little bit about that too. That it wasn't something that you just snapped your fingers and then the next day you gave it. It was a whole process. How long were you working on that?
We were told about that we were accepted as the finalists in November, and we gave our talks at the end of February. And literally from November to February, we worked on writing it, and then of course then practicing it and on and on. But I had 8 iterations of my talk, just as an example. And Barry was not only the organizer of TEDx Asheville, she also was our coach.
A great coach too.
Yeah. He is amazing. And I mean, I would never have gotten where I was without her. So we started first with just conversation about my story and what I'm thinking about. And I was a bit of a wreck. She would tell you that. I was like, I don't know. Like, I have these ideas. And again, I'm much more better. Like, I'm a visual person. So I'm not really great organizing my words. I'm not great at that. And so she just let me talk. And then she was listening and she'd be like, okay, so I'm hearing this and this and this and this. And she helped me kind of formulate this pattern in my talk. And then I'd give her a draft, and then we'd edit that, and I'd give her another. So it took 8 times.
And just listening to you, you said that, but you're so cool, just, and it's fun to listen to, and your enthusiasm for it. You've done this now, so you did the TED Talk. Are we going to do anything with it, or are you going to give it again, or have you given it again?
I have not given it again. It is now, you can find it on my website, and I was really lucky that TED, so when you do this, they have to review it. You send your videos to TEDx, and then they review it, and then typically just get a link back of a YouTube video so you can share it. Maybe they'll share it on their YouTube page. So they actually shared mine on their YouTube page, and then 2 days after they did that, they chose it as an editor's choice.
Very nice.
And then a couple days after that, TED.com brought it up to their site, which is really like the ultimate honor. I can't even. It's really hard to believe, but so that's how I'm at the moment sharing it, is just from those links.
Do you ever see yourself doing a TED Talk?
Another one?
For the national, for the.
Oh gosh, I don't know.
No?
Maybe.
Well, let me ask you too, because what you're saying also seems to segue into a couple other projects. I see like either a magazine article, or do you see this as being a first step to your, I don't know, first book or next book? Do you see a book out of this?
I've talked about that with a couple of people. I don't have anything right now that is coming to the surface, but it's funny. My work is so personal, meaning it's all about, like, I love working with people. I want to work with people in person. That is just, it feeds me. And again, I really believe it's what I'm meant to do. So at the moment, I'm just trying to drum up more of I just want to do these workshops with people and create and collaborate with the poet and stuff like that. That's what I'm focusing on right now. But
because maybe. Listening to you, I just see so much out there that I'd love to read more about it or see more about it. That I think you have a gift to bring all these different things together, which is really cool. The question is though, how do you manage to do it kind of all? In other words, do you also have a pair of roller skates there that you said walking on your hands? But I mean, to be running a school, to be taking care of 2 kids, to be married, to doing all this stuff keeps you pretty busy.
It keeps me really busy, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah, the accepting, I guess too, though, you'd like to have more time to do some artwork yourself again, or.
Yes, and my kids are now 17 and 15, and they're going to be on their way with their wings here soon. So, I'm grateful that, one, they are part of this part of my life. So they're seeing these things that I'm striving for, even as an old lady,
Did they see the TED Talk? Were they there?
Yeah, they were there. They were there.
Okay,
I mean,
great.
it was really moving to be able to do that with them here in the house. They're still living here. And so they're 100% behind all of this, and they are so much of my motivation. And whenever I have something happen, I share it with them. And so, I know that I'm going to have a lot of time on my hands in just a few years, where they're not going to be here. They're going to be off at college and doing their, beginning their lives. So I'm grateful to be able to look ahead to that. I'm not going to be like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? My kids are gone, I'm going to have plenty to do.
And hopefully when you share your ideas or your projects with the kids, They give you positive feedback as well?
They do.
Okay, crucial. They don't force you to get out of education, you know. Let me
No.
ask you this. If folks want to find out more about you, either about your artwork or the school, what's the best bet?
So for my artwork and the workshops I do, it's my website would be the best. It's www.gingerhuebner.com.
And spell Huebner, how?
Yep, Huebner is Huebner.
Okay, so for your artwork, that's best bet.
Yes.
And
And then for the school, it's rootsandwingsarts.com.
and is it A and D with the roots and wings or a plus?
It's A&D.
Okay,
Yeah.
roots and wings. Anyway, thank you very much for being my guest. This is the first half hour on the Blaine's World Show, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Woo, thank you so much.
Okay, speak to you soon. And
Okay.
as Ginger kind of works her way out of the studio, or I kick her out of the studio, either way, I'm going to try to find my second guest. Let's see if we can get him. And so Ginger's gone. And as we're waiting for our second guest, there he is. I'm just going to make a brief announcement, Jody. I should mention that you're listening to WPVM, and our station's mission is to foster community through programming that cultivates dialogue to inform and entertain. The station provides the medium for artists, businesses, community leaders, and nonprofits to share their voice on live radio and also on Facebook Live. Listeners are invited to help support WPVM's efforts by making a tax-deductible contribution. They can do so by going to the website, WPVMFM.org, and look at the donate option on the upper right-hand side. It's next my pleasure to introduce my second guest of today's show, and he is Jody Williams, co-founder of Help Asheville Bears. And Jody, you can wave to all your fans and friends in Facebook world if they're watching, and that's Jody Williams. I should mention that Jody was born, a rare person actually born and raised in Asheville. He's a former Harley mechanic and business entrepreneur. He and his brother Alex Williams founded Help Asheville Bears out of respect for the bears that inhabit these mountains. Bear behaviorism is a personal interest. Forming HAB began with learning about Peaches, a mother bear with 3 cubs, when she lost one of her limbs from a trap. Wow. Both brothers have always been advocates of living in harmony with nature and its welfare, especially bears. And let me ask you this question, Jody. We mentioned you grew up in Asheville. Did you always know you wanted to be a bear guy as a kid?
No, it was actually a Black Mountain, so I just always say Asheville because that's how
Right.
people consider it.
Sure.
I never did. We were always out in the woods. We didn't play inside, so we always loved to be outside now. And there wasn't as many bears back then in these mountains. They have grown in number thanks to all the programs that have been going on. But I did find a rock recently that my mom said I painted when I was 4 years old. And funny enough, it had a bear on it.
Okay, that was a sign. And also, as a kid, did you watch Yogi Bear? Was that your favorite TV show?
Boo Boo and the Ranger Rick.
He knew it. So let's fast forward a little bit. So you always had an interest in nature and being outside. What got you into starting, which is a tremendously impressive idea, this nonprofit? What gave you the idea?
Well, it was Peaches, honestly. I had moved back from Colorado, and I found that, as you can see, the chink behind me, it's a 100-year-old cabin that I live in, away from people. It's a water source on this side of the mountain. I got a rainbow trout pond just, a few yards away from me right here. And so I get a lot of wildlife here, and I particularly got interested in the bears. And when I get interested in something, I soak up anything I can, whether it be online or books, and I learn everything I can. And that's what I was doing. And then there's a particular bear that would be hanging around here all the time. I didn't even know male or female at the time. I didn't know that much. But I did learn, and my 4-year-old niece at the time, she's on 8 now, she named this bear Peaches because one day she ate 15 peaches right in a row that I'd thrown out. They were almost back. And she was a first-time mother of 3. She was a young bear, and she had 3 cubs that year, and she was here daily. I mean, She was always watching us work or trying to fix on the pond. She would just stay on the hill and just watch us. She was a curious bear. But in 2019, it would have been July, she went missing. I mean, we were all very worried, hit by a car, I just had no idea. And on August 18th, the day before my birthday of 2019, sorry, still gets, she came walking in very emaciated. The cubs looked fine where she laid up nursing but not eating herself, and half of her front right limb was missing. Tore us up. I cried. I knew this bear for many years. And later that day, me and my brother went over to our parents' house, and our stepfather, Colonel Scotty Morgan, he's one of the longest POWs ever held. We were watching the news together, and another bear missing the opposite limb was spotted and put on WLOS just a mile from it as the bear trap. And that's when the colonel said, somebody's trapping bears, and it'll take rewards to find out who's doing it, because money makes people talk.
By the way, that's where I think I first saw you. I think I saw you on WLOS, and I said to my producer, Cappy, boy, that'd be a fascinating show, that you got an interest in people trapping the bears. And talk about, you said that money talks. How do you use the money to help the bears?
Well, Colonel Morgan and his wife, Carol Morgan, provide the rewards.
Very nice.
Rewards when we find out about things, especially the local ring of trappers who we know of. And, it depends on the case where it is, because we fight against all poaching, not just bears. We think it's, the only thing it takes for evil to prevail is for good men and women to do nothing.
Good point.
So we had to stand up. We had been retired for approximately 7 years and enjoying our family and fishing and whatnot. And when Peaches came in, we went right to work. And to be honest, we've run 5 businesses at one time. And this is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Running 5 businesses, Harley mechanic, avid scuba diver, you name it. Hardest thing.
Well, talk about back to Peaches. So you found Peaches. Is Peaches still around, or what happened to Peaches?
She is not coming near this property anymore because she got hit with the trap around here. It was a snare trap. When you see an injury high up on a limb like that, missing half a limb, that's a snare trap. They set up barrels or buckets baited with food where the bear will reach in as deep as it can, and that snare will get them. Now, if it's just a pile, it's typically your smaller jaw style traps. But I have seen them lose a limb to conibear traps too. One down towards Lansing and West Jefferson specifically. And right now we have been locating one up in Wisconsin around the New Lisbon area that currently has a conibear trap on its right paw. DNR has barrel traps out. We got multiple satellite cams that have had multiple sightings, which has helped them put their barrel traps out, but they've had no luck catching this bear yet. It's been, I think, 24 days now since the first sighting.
We'll talk about the when a bear gets trapped or poor or something. So I assume that's illegal?
Trapping bear is highly illegal in every state except Maine.
But so why do people do it?
Sometimes people are just outright mean. I have heard of people putting conibear traps and such underneath their bird feeders because they refuse to remove their bird feeders and they don't like the bears getting in them. But that's kind of just, that's just so wrong, because you put food out for animals, everything's going to come. You can't just say this is for birds or this is for squirrels, And but I have heard of that. But most of the time it's just poachers. They're trying to do this for their parts. The 3-legged bears, which, by the way, we're at 37 bears like this right now currently, and I'm sure that number will go up. They do this for their parts, specifically their paws and gallbladders. One bowl of bear paw soup in China will cost you about $1,000 US. And then they use the bile from the gallbladders too. If you look it up, you can see Asia has a big problem with bear bile farms, and that's starting to get shut down. And there's many rescues over there, but they're still daily saving bears from bear bile farms where they're kept in a cage. They can never move, and they have a plastic tube hooked up into their gallbladder to permanently, all the time, drain their bile for Asian medicines. And that just terrible for the bears.
I mean, it's terrible just to listen to it, but I'm asking the question, so I appreciate you answering them. But how do you even find out about this in the first time you found out about this?
Well, once we found out about the second bear and the colonel said put the rewards on it, we created the Facebook page, honestly thinking we was going to catch a neighborhood trapper.
Right.
And then the reports just started piling in. They kept coming. The community wanted to help. I mean, we'd be nothing without the community. I mean, and you know how Asheville is. It's just a wonderful place to be. A lot of wonderful people, and everybody came together, giving us the bear sightings. Some of them they had video of. A lot of them we had to go put up trail cams or different things. And we've documented 37 bears so far missing limbs. 19 of those are just right here in Buncombe and Henderson County.
Wow. Let's make it a little bit more positive, though, that, as you indicate, there are a lot of bears out there.
Yes, sir.
What should folks do if they see a bear in the backyard?
Well, hopefully they don't have any attractants out there. When I say that, they're not throwing out beer corn. They ain't got bird feeders, hummingbird feeders. They got their trash secured, hopefully. That's a big problem in the Asheville area, which we are working on right now to come up with some solutions on that. There's just not enough bear-proof trash cans.
By the way, let me ask you about those too. Do they work, the bear-proof trash cans?
We put video on our page of a bear, and somebody kind of did a title saying it's giving the trash can CPR because it was just jumping up and down, and it couldn't get it open. They'll drag it down a hill sometimes, but they're not going to get it open, and that needs to be, countywide. It really needs to be everywhere. Because North Carolina has the densest and largest population of black bears in North Carolina. And the largest, as far as weight and size, is down in Plymouth, North Carolina. But Asheville is a very unique area for bears anywhere in North Carolina because we're an urban bear area. It's not uncommon to see it come through your yard. As long as you ain't got attractants out, just let the bear be. Make sure your dog's inside, of course. That's the number one reason for any bear aggression is an off-leash dog. It's not cute to show videos of bears or dogs going after bears because that could end well or end very bad for the dog, but it's definitely most likely going to end bad for the bear too, because then people will want to go kill it for doing what it's naturally supposed to do and defend itself. But enjoy through your yard. If you don't want it there, they're very easy to scare off. I use an empty water bottle and just squeeze it. They don't like man-made sounds. And if that doesn't work, you just step the noise levels up, air horns, pots and pans, things like that.
Do they work?
It depends on the bear. You got certain neighborhoods like over towards the east side that they actually use air horns to notify their neighbors there's a bear. So the bears are kind of gotten used to that. Sudden sharp noises, even something as simple as I was to grab another chair over here and slide it across my concrete porch, that noise would scare a bear, especially a younger bear. Right now is mamas are weaning their yearlings, their cubs of last year, and it's also mating season. So there's a lot of bear activity going on right now.
If you see a bear in your backyard, what should you do?
If it was me, I would enjoy it. Let it do its thing. As long as you ain't got nothing there for it to eat, it's going to move on. That's what they do. A bear will not hang out unless it's got something to eat. It may use one of your trees as like a mama bear. It may use one of your trees as what they call a safety tree. And she'll send the cubs up that tree and either nap at the bottom because moms always need breaks. Or she just needs a break from the kids and needs to go eat herself. And she'll go forage and come back to them. So this time of year, we get a lot of calls about orphan bear cubs, and every single time they have been reunited so far, on every call. And that's just because mom went off foraging or got scared off by a dog. But you get the noises away, the human smells, the dog smells, mama will come back. She knows where them cubs are.
I think I know the answer to this, but I'd rather have you answer it. And that's the question is, so you see a bear, what about feeding a bear?
Do not feed bears. That is
Yeah.
very bad. From use to humans. You should not do that. It's as they say, a fed bear is a dead bear. We're very lucky with North Carolina wildlife. Doesn't just come out and euthanize them. Relocation is not really in the mix. Typically, that doesn't work. 85% of the time, it does not work. Actually, you should never feed bears. That's just going to keep, just like any other animal, it's going to keep it around. And when that bear gets used to you, you may think it's cute, but then when that bear goes over to Jim Bob's place over here and he don't like bears, and it goes up on his porch, he could shoot it, he could do anything. And I've had that happen. I've seen that happen, and been on calls where people have shot bears because they were getting in their bird.
Are bears inherently dangerous?
No, not at all. They are very timid creatures. Here's one of my most favorite sayings comes from Mike McIntosh, one of my mentors at Bear With Us, bearwithus.org. It's a rehab sanctuary up in Canada. And he teaches through his website and online things about bears. He's a biologist and a behaviorist. I'm no biologist, but I like to think of myself as an amateur behaviorist. I can tell you every communication that they do, but since the year 1870, there's been 67 fatalities from black bears. So literally everything else you do in your life is more dangerous. More people die of taking selfies each year.
Great line. And by the way, you're raising a good point too. The fact that some of the people who get injured by bears or harmed by bears are kind of setting themselves up for it. You taught me something in terms of, putting lots of food out. You're going to invite lots of bears to your house if you have lots of food out.
Yeah, and bears aren't typically aggressive. Most every attack has been because of an off-leash dog. Because what happens, excuse me, is that dog goes after the bear. The bear does what it's supposed to do and defend itself. It goes after the dog. The dog goes back to the owner and chaos ensues. It's just being proper when you're out hiking or anything. We saved a bear last year on the parkway that they were going to put down because it came after a couple. They were carrying food where they were not supposed to, and they let their dog go after a bear, off-leash dog.
Are bears? Yeah.
In fact, it's got to be a stable one.
Are bears smart?
They are highly intelligent. They form bonds. You can see many videos online where bears have formed bonds with people even. They're very social creatures. Their intelligence actually rivals that of the great primates.
How about language knowledge? Do they pick up language, or do bears learn certain things in language?
Yeah. I've had bears that they know their name because they come through here so often, and I talk to them. I don't sit here and feed them and let them on my porch or nothing. But while they're out there, I'll talk to them. I've had a couple that actually knew their name, but they're not inherently dangerous. That's a big myth perpetuated by media, Hollywood, and especially nature documentaries. I know every bear communication and what sounds they make, and I can tell you what they mean. But you watch a nature documentary and you'll see them show a black bear roaring and growling.
Right.
Those sounds. That's dubbed in by lions and tigers and even dogs.
Interesting. What gave you the idea to start a nonprofit?
Well, we knew we had to do something about this, and it does take a little bit of money to do this. We really don't take in that much money. We actually spend our money.
Sure.
We just went up to Wisconsin for a week. We're trying to locate that bear with the paw on a trap. And that community in New Lisbon and Necedah, Wisconsin, I mean, I would have swore I was in Asheville other than there weren't no mountains. Beautiful people. We got invited to dinner by people to give us a home-cooked meal while we were out of town. The whole community came together. We're constantly getting calls and emails and messages about this bear. And while we were there, we documented 2 other bears missing half a limbs from snare traps.
I mean,
that wildlife bear didn't know about.
Yeah, but just to see it, it must almost like not disgust you. It does disgust you. I mean, disgust me just listening to it.
It does. The people that do this are very evil. The local ring that we know who it is, they're evil. You should see their criminal records. We've knocked on their very doors. They've threatened the life of our informant. I mean, we have an informant that came forward, not just other proof that we have. And they've threatened his life, which, you know, I've tried many times to get our district attorney to call me back about this, about a man's life getting threatened, and try to get the SBI on this case, because he's the only one that can assign it. And to no avail, no communication whatsoever.
I was going to ask you that it would seem that you would think law enforcement would be interested in this, or want to do something about it.
Yeah, and a lot of the bear poaching is also covered up, especially since North Carolina Wildlife did Operation Something Brewing, which entangled a lot of their own in illegal activities. It's just they don't bust bear poachers no more. And there's one lawyer that gets them all off every time. Going
back to giving a positive spin on this, for folks who don't know about bears, talk about like the life of bears. So they have a mother bear and their father bear, and I guess they have bear sex or something, and then there are baby bears born. How many bears typically do they do this each year? Do they do it every couple of years? And how many bears wind up out there?
The cycle is every 2 years, as long as mom can raise the cubs and the yearlings. The cubs will stay with mom for 14 to 16 months, and then she runs them off late spring. And late spring, early summer is when mating happens. It's happening right now. I've visibly seen this a few times already this year. And what happened, that's the only time dad's around. And they do their thing. And bears have what's called delayed implantation. So she's not pregnant once they do their thing in mating season. It's a delayed implantation. The blastocyst will not attach to the uterine wall until the fall. And then she'll go through gestation. Now, the number of cubs that a mom will have is dependent on how good the food source was the previous fall. And the better the food and more food, the more cubs. So they can have anywhere from 1 to 5. Could have 6, but we've never seen 6. But we have seen 5. And they're born in late January, early February, give or take 2 weeks, because nature's not on our clock on the wall. And when they're born, they don't weigh but the size of a stick of butter. You can literally hold one in the palm of your hand. They're blind, they're deaf. Mama stays in the den, takes care of them, nurses them, massages them with her tongue so that they defecate. She'll eat that to keep the den clean and for whatever nutrients are left. And she finally brings them out, many weeks later, about 12 to 14 weeks. And that's why you start, when they first come out, the cubs are, only as big as a very small house cat. But at that age, they can already climb a tree better than they can walk. Accidents happen. Bears fall out of trees. Nobody's perfect. And I actually saw video of this yesterday locally, but luckily a branch caught the cub on the way down, and it was fine. It stunned it, knocked its breath out for a second.
Do they ever get stuck up in a tree?
Typically, no. They might get scared and cry out for mom, but they eventually come down. But this past year, we did have a cub get up in a tree, kind of over towards Biltmore area off River Road. And it got its rear paw wedged in between the trunk of the tree and a branch. And it had been there for hours. And they called us. We went out. I got a hold of biologists. They came out a little over an hour later. And it was a guy named Luckadoo, one of their bear technicians. He climbed that tree. I mean, he stuck an extension ladder up, went to the top of that, strapped it to the tree because it was real high up, and then used climbing spikes on the tree and went up to the bear cub.
Wow.
And was able to release it, look at it, and see it wasn't broken or any injury. And he put it back on the tree, and that thing went down that tree like lightning. And it took us about a week, but we finally got confirmation that both cubs, because one cub stayed with it as a buddy, it didn't want to leave its sibling, and both of them caught back up to mom. Now mom has all 4 cubs in tow this year.
What's your feeling about bears being in zoos?
Don't like it. I don't like zoos at all.
Exactly.
If you go to the nature center or even the bears over in Cherokee, you'll see they'll sway back and forth, or they'll do circles. They exhibit a lot of anxiety behavior. This is not good for the bear. They're not highly, and I've seen people, we team members have seen people throw sweets and crap food over to the bear at the nature center. And then the one in Cherokee, it's concrete pits. I mean, I wish they had a larger place. We've been fighting with North Carolina Wildlife to get an approval for a badly needed bear rehab and sanctuary here.
Wow.
So many get injured, plus the 3-legged bears are going to need care in their later years, because what will happen, they'll either start walking upright or they'll walk on their elbows. Like Rose the bear, it's a bear cub in India caught in a snare. She lost her front limb. She had to learn to walk on her nose. And Amazon was shown this bear, Amazon executives, and they removed over 400 items off their platform, but nowhere else in the world. And that's another fight we're in. We have a big petition. We have got Amazon to drop the bear traps and snares and jaw styles, but they still need to make recompense and get rid of attractants and help fight the banned trapping. Over half the world's countries have banned trapping. We need to catch up.
If people want to get involved, I guess in one of 2 ways. First of all, if they want to find out more about some of the cool work you and your brother are doing, what's the best bet?
Our Facebook page, Help Asheville Bears, or HAB, H-A-B, is the best way. We do have a website, helpashevillebears.org. However, right now that is being upgraded. We have people working on that right now, so hopefully that'll be up really, really soon, because we need both platforms, obviously. But our Facebook page is we're somewhere close to 300,000 followers.
Wow.
So that's what gives the bears a voice, though. When we come across something that's not right, and our followers speak up and make the phone calls, send the emails, and be proactive about these things, whether it be getting wildlife to come out and trank a bear with a lid around its head, or fighting Amazon, or anything. It's so critical, because the community, the followers, that's the true voice of these bears.
And if people want to get involved also, aside from following on Facebook, making donations, whatever, can people actually come out and help you do some of the work you do?
We're discussing that, because not everybody knows bears. So
exactly, yeah.
That goes out on the bear calls. We do have a lot of volunteers that help us, whether it be from production to, doing posts, to answering comments or messages, emails. And we do want to expand that, because, we're kind of drowning a little bit. We need a little help. And I'm getting ready to organize a monthly meeting that anybody local, followers, non-followers, it don't matter, can come out and we can discuss bears. Let's be social. Let's talk strategies. See if somebody can be an assistance in one area or another.
Right.
And there's a lot of people wanting to do that. They're chomping at the bit for these meetings, actually.
And one last time, the best bet is the Facebook page is what again?
Help Asheville Bears.
Okay, I'd like to thank you, Jody Williams, for being my guest this second half hour of the Blaine's World show. Ginger Huebner for being my guest the first half hour. Thanks for catching the show, as well as my producer, Cappy Tossetti. And we'll see you all next week. Thanks, guys.